cluster for the Southeast 7 United States to bring you the second in our SplashLink series entitled Bringing New Technologies to Market. My co-founder, Dan Diocampo, who is at Georgia State University, is unable to join us today. I'm Gary Keller. I am CEO of and based in Chicago. And, we have with us presenting today for the seminar E.B. Holst, who is focused on water-related market trends and technologies. And she's been doing this since 2009, identifying key water-related changes, commercial assets, and innovation opportunities relevant to markets around the world. E.B. formerly was at Price Waterhouse and spent 12 years in Silicon Valley as a veteran in the information technology industry. She's a seasoned consultant, navigator of startup landscapes, and has worked in information and clean technologies. E.B. brings us 25 years of management and practical experience in the strategic design and launch of new business models, alliances across multiple sectors, and more than a dozen global industries. Within the water industry specifically, E.B. is tapped as an advisor and speaker on water issues, opportunities, trends, and technical considerations by organizations including the White House, Brown Gibbons Lang and Company, and the Ohio Department of Transportation. Additionally, water-intensive stakeholders such as oil and gas have also relied on E.B.'s expertise as a speaker. E.B.'s provided testimony regarding Ohio State Bill 179 as a precedent-setting piece of legislation within the U.S. for recycled water for the private sourcing, and serves on the Environmental Technologies Trade Advisory Committee for the U.S. Department of Commerce on global markets for water and wastewater technologies. E.B. is a graduate of the University of Michigan, and we're very honored to have you with us today, E.B. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your presentation. But before you start, what I'd like to do is we have a number of people that are on the call with us today, and I'd like to just find out who's on the call because not everybody was able to make it. So if we could go around, but as we do, you can tell me what company or entity you're with, and also why you're on the call, because obviously there's some relationship or interest to water, and want to find out what your passion is about water, what your relationship is to it, you'd like to be able to learn or gain from it. So who gets to start? Somebody?
Well, I can.
Who is that?
My name is Hal.
Hi,
Hal Slater.
Hi, thank you.
And I'm looking to commercialize my patent on heat pump water heating. And my patent calls for extracting available heat from the cold water that's used in a home to make the hot water very, very efficiently and save a lot of energy. And so basically I'm using the flow of water to the home as a transfer medium for energy, like a gas line or a wire.
Okay. And your email has halslater.com. Does your entity, have you given it a name?
Well, yeah, we've been calling it the triple hybrid heat pump water heater, but it's the patent is under geothermal because that's where the heat source is.
So the name of your company is Geothermal? What's the name?
Oh, no, I don't have a company name. I'm just trying to have a private entity license the patent.
Got it. All right, perfect. Thank you, Hal. Who else is with us? There's 11 people on the call.
Hi, this is Terry Boyard. I'm with Able LLC, And we have a patented process that purifies water without power. And we also have discovered that we are the only, I guess, the only technology that will kill Legionella in hot water systems.
Wow.
Legionella and what else?
Basically, we kill all pathogens on contact.
Okay. Now, do you have
We
a...
don't require power. Basically, just the pathogen has to come into contact with our proprietary formula, and it kills it on contact.
So, do you have a startup, or is it just the technology being commercialized?
We do have a startup. The name of the company is Able LLC, and we are headquartered in Atlanta.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Spell your name because you didn't show up on my list.
Oh, sorry. I just registered like 45 minutes ago, so I'm a latecomer.
That's all right. How do you spell your name?
Terri.
Uh-huh.
Last name is Bolyard, Bolyard, and I am the CFO of our company.
Awesome. Very good. All right. Who else?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Gadsden, and I am an associate. Hello, how are you? I'm an associate with Water Gurus and Associates, and we do a lot of water quality, wastewater consulting work for various companies. And also I'm working with Dan to support H2O Tech and to try to help execute some of its projects.
Yes, Joel Rosenfeld, who is the water guru, is on our board.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the call.
We've worked together for quite some time.
Very good. Who else do we have on the call? Don't be shy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abe Serrano, and I'm the design director for a design consulting agency called Water UX, and we focus on developing digital solutions surrounding big data for the water sector.
Great. Okay, terrific. Thanks for being here. Who else?
Philip Ashcroft from the Northeast Water Innovation Network. We're a not-for-profit based out of Boston who supports innovation and development of innovative technologies in the water sector.
Great. Give me 1 second, Philip. I made a terrible secretary. So, it's water-based startups.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And it's Northeast.
That's right.
Northeast. What's the name of the
Water Innovation Network.
Northeast Water Innovation Network. Tell me.
Hello?
What's your region, Philip?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
The Northeast Water Innovation Network, what region do you cover?
The northeast of the USA.
So starting
New England and New York.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Someone just joined the call? All right. Who else? Anyone else on the call? Great. EB?
Yes.
Why don't we get started with the presentation?
That sounds great. Well, thank you, Gary. I really appreciate being a part of this today, and I'm excited to be talking to a number of you that are inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs yourselves, as well as some of the folks here that are, really trying to support the ecosystem of innovation in the water industry. I want to talk a little bit about the process of an innovation to market. We're going to talk a little bit about how how different companies come at it, and we're going to talk a little bit too about the different parts of the process of bringing an innovation to market. So for example, many of you will be coming at this from a technology standpoint. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but there are some characteristics regarding the technology feasibility stage of a company, and these aren't necessarily going to be in order. I just have them in an order to indicate what we at SplashLink often see in terms of where many of our innovators begin in the water industry. Next would be business viability. So you may have a technology that you think is pretty amazing, and now you're looking to see whether or not you can make a business out of it. A little bit further along, as you get the first two stages under your belt, you get into some of the nitty-gritty. It's looking at how you can pilot your product and how or if you need to get certifications in order to bring your product to market. And then you start to discover how desirable your product is in the market. Unfortunately, this can be a really long process just to get to this fourth stage of really launching and building a full business around it. Let's talk a little bit about technical feasibility. Most innovations within the water industry that we see begin within some kind of a controlled environment. It may be within a lab where you are working on something and you discovered properties of a material, or you may discover that a particular process or piece of equipment or technology can actually do something that's a little bit unexpected and seems exceptional. So, in the water industry, generally speaking, we don't tend to see a specific market problem necessarily driving the initial innovation. We tend to see a discovery. Once you actually have that eureka moment, then it's really putting your arms around that. It's saying, okay, well, what was it about the process that we did? Is it repeatable? Is it, what are the steps such that we can put a package around it? We have a parameter around it to make it either an innovative specific process or an innovative product. And then there's, of course, testing it in the lab and starting to look into whether or not there's going to be a fit in the market. Does this solve a particular problem? So, for example, one of our attendees today was talking about Legionella. Discovering that you have a process or a technology that can kill on contact, and that you can do it with low power, for example, and particularly where we hear in the market that there are various outbreaks of Legionella, can actually help to define the niche that you can address as you mature your process of bringing something to market. Now, as I show you these stages in technical feasibility, I just want to clarify that any and every one of these steps within a stage can take a very long time. We're kind of blowing through some information here, and this is a somewhat dense presentation about the various things involved with bringing something to market. But obviously going between, your first discovery and then actually taking something out to test it in more real world-like conditions before even putting it in front of a potential customer can take months, it can take years. Usually it takes years. So in that period of time that can take years, really get your hands around what is this thing that we have that may be a fit for the water industry. There are a number of needs for that innovator in the course of going through those different challenges. one of them is oftentimes, you know, the person who makes the discovery may not be the person who has the expertise to actually define what this discovery is, what it does, and what's the specific package around it. Is it a mechanism? Is it a process? So what we tend to see oftentimes is incubators that have been formed to support the water industry in various parts of the country really try to equip the incubator with this type of expertise to help innovators really define what this product or process is. Benchmarking the performance. So this is actually a theme that will stretch across all of the stages, but this is where we first see it, and that is, okay, you know, what was the benchmark of, say, for example, it's something that is an intervention on water quality. What was the quality of the water beforehand? What is it after we put it through our product or our process? But then expanding that such that you start to understand what other products and processes are out there, and do they perform better or worse, or you know, where are you on the continuum? So establishing the benchmarks that you need in order to understand the potential for impact of your product and process is really critical. Next is really getting a sense of regulatory standards. Now this, you know, this is a really complicated space to navigate. Regulations include national level regulations, state by state regulations, even sometimes regional regulations. Understanding what regulations may be applicable to what it is you're trying to bring to market is really important, because it may in fact translate to, you know, some refinements in your product definition and structure, but it also may define how quickly you're able to bring it to different markets. So for example, in some for some types of technology, for example, anything that has to do with drinking water, the regulations are very, very high, and if your product cannot perform to the standards set by a regulation, then you need to either go back to the drawing board or perhaps look at a different application for what it is you want to do with your product to impact the market. Lab facilities for testing and measurement. So, you know, this is generally not something that's a huge challenge if, in fact, a discovery or an innovation comes out of a university setting, obviously. But that's not necessarily where all of our innovations come from. And certainly for the time it can take to really put your product or process through the rigors of its potential applications, you know, a young entrepreneur may well have graduated. So again, this is where we tend to see with different clusters around the country are exploring relationships with the universities, and, you know, looking at, you know, potential lab facilities and so forth in order to provide support for innovators to really test and put their product or process through rigor. And then, of course, capital. So as I mentioned, this stage, just the technology feasibility side of things can take years. And oftentimes, you know, it needs to be done on a very tight budget unless there's some kind of a partnership in place. Sometimes, for example, universities will partner with an innovator. But, you know, having the capital in order to support this stage is really important, and it's generally too early for any kind of a venture capital or even seed capital. Venture and seed capital assume that you've got some idea of how you're going to make money on it, and you may just not be that far along yet. So there's oftentimes grants and nonprofit dollars that are available out there to support this R&D side of things. And then there's the real world information. So Just to provide a little bit of context, so Gary provided some background on me, and I'm going to provide you with everything that we go through, a little bit about SplashLink, which is our company. We're a partner to H2O Tech, and there's a reason for that, and that is to support innovation going on in the water industry. So there are a number of different resources to support innovators in this process, and this is just a small snapshot of the kinds of things that we help with in that. One of those things is to be able to provide innovators insights on market challenges. So as I talked about before, you oftentimes have innovations in the industry that are coming from the lab, a eureka moment, but not necessarily driven by kind of a first-hand experience of various customers that you're hearing a theme over and over again, and then going to the lab to say, well, how can we solve this problem? So, you know, one of the things that we help with is to provide some of that, you know, direct insight into the problems that players are trying to solve, and also provide connection to R&D types of capital, like I mentioned. So right now, there's some $10 billion plus available to the water industry undeployed for a range of different things, whether it's water-related projects that a utility is trying to undertake to new innovation support, and that's one of the things that we try to support innovators to get access to what those opportunities may be. Next stage is business viability. So kind of the natural follow-on, right? So you've got something, it looks like it could have a pretty powerful impact, and the next question is, you know, can we make a business out of this? Is this something where there are actual buyers for this? You know, is there a particular problem out there that it looks like we can solve, and how frequently does that problem come up? Who are the players that are accountable to solve that problem, and what kind of money do they have to spend? What model would it be? Is it something where we create a device and we sell the device? Is it something where we create a device and we lease the device, and the model is essentially some kind of recurring revenue, you know, rather than just trying to sell a piece of equipment into the market? IP protection is a big one, right? So if you're going to make a business out of it, depending on what your business model is, do you need to put in place some kind of intellectual property protection for what it is that you have? And this alone can be a very expensive process. So this involves, you know, doing patent searches and, you know, potentially bringing in an attorney to help you draw up the patents and actually identify where there may be synergistic patents, or you know, do you need to go back to the drawing board for a new design because there are patents that are too close that already exist? And then tech scalability. So you know, I did a visit at one point about 2 years ago to NASA Glenn, and they had a piece of technology that they were essentially looking to do some tech transfer and spin it out. And this was a piece of technology that did water purification essentially by, you know, just rocket scale energy blast to water, which is going to kill anything in its path. I mean, you know, water or not. And it literally had parts of it that were duct taped together, which you wouldn't expect when you go to visit NASA. But you know, and that's oftentimes where a new innovation may start. Is like, wow, we can try this and use that and put it together, and does it work? And if it does work, then taking that and translating it to, well, what are the actual components that we would need to mass produce in order to bring this to market? And again, this translates to some of the types of support that an entrepreneur needs, which is not only having information on potential market demand, but also getting the support of people who have done this before, people who have helped to figure out what it takes to go from the duct tape to, you know, something that can be mass produced. And at the same time, who are the potential players that might make sense to either go up against or to partner with? So if you have a new technology, for example, anything that's in the space of digital right now, you know, smart water technologies, I think we have somebody on the call that's focused on that. This is a very interesting time for smart water, digital related technologies, because there are some very big corporations out there in the industry that are looking for new devices that will expand the reach of data collection. And identifying who those players are fairly early can mean that you can also potentially get a partnership that will help you to pay for some of the assessments that we're talking about. So working capital is an important part of this as well. Capital is important throughout this whole process, and oftentimes one of the bigger challenges. And with SplashLink, one of the areas that we support entrepreneurs within stage 2 is to be able to provide insights on market demand. So for example, if you are trying to solve an issue around, you know, Legionella outbreaks, for example, one of the things that we have on our platform are bids and projects and requests for information from all over the U.S., North America, some from other parts of the world, that you are able to search to see how often does Legionella come up. For example, is this a you know, a theme that tends to occur in the New England area? Is it something that there are some repeat buyers that are trying to address issues? The database that we have has some 60,000 of these that can help to identify trends and where there might be market demand for what it is you're trying to do. But we also have a directory of existing players. So similarly, you could search for, as some of the players that are out there looking for solutions on our platform, search for, you know, somebody who's got expertise in Legionella, which can give you some insights on who might be your competitors, as well as who might be a potential partner, and access to working capital. So core product market fit. This is one of the least discussed, I believe, areas of the process, although it can be one of the most arduous. In terms of being able to bring something to market, this is where companies sometimes die, is having capital to just try it out with real life customers is a really significant and oftentimes expensive, long-running challenge. But if you're going to bring something to market, you have to demonstrate that it works in a real-world setting. And if you are lucky, you're going to do it with somebody that has a brand name that then you can leverage into your next set of piloting. In the process of doing that piloting, developing the case studies that gives you the numbers you need to up your credibility about the technology that you're bringing. And then certification. So we're talking a bit about regulatory environment around this industry is pretty rigorous, and being able to get your product certified, drinking water certified, or certified for particular contaminants, can be really important in order to accelerate your ability to get into new customers and expand from there. Critical needs in this stage include information about that certification. certification. So, for example, I was speaking just ago with a company. They were dealing with certain types of wastewater issues, and had done some piloting, but people were really not aware of the different potential certifications they would need to accelerate their into different markets. And it's not a surprise because it's not easy to find this information. It's a very fragmented industry, as any of you, I'm sure, have experienced, and it also means that somebody either have done the research to find out what potential certifications would apply, or somebody told you that you needed to. It's not an obvious thing. There are no really obvious places to go to for finding
Evie, I want to stop for just a second. Everyone, if you would, please put your phones on mute. Someone has their phone off mute, and there's a lot of noise in the background. Thanks so much. Go ahead.
if I can. Okay. Overcoming high regulatory barriers. That if you're bringing something to market that is going to be particularly vulnerable, I guess, to regulatory requirements. Generally speaking, tools and support translates to money and lab and testing facilities. It's and some good people around you, more often than not, that are scientifically inclined to help you work through some of those issues. It's again a very time-consuming process. High regulatory barriers are a key feature of this industry, and particularly when it comes to things like drinking water. Pilot partner candidates. Now, so a lot of identifying pilot partners happens today through, relationships, right? So an organization like H2O Tech can really help with helping you to connect with potential players that may have an interest in what it is that you're trying to bring to market, that may have the type of challenge that you're trying to address. But it also is important to use other tools. So if you are aware of, even if you come across a news item, I'm going to pick on the Legionella again, with my apologies, but doing a Google search to see where some of the Legionella outbreaks are, more than likely news items are gonna give you a sense of who that organization is that has to deal with it, and potentially even a name. With a tool like SplashLink, where we have the bids and projects and so forth, we have contact information for organizations that have been, putting money into trying to solve various types of problems. So even if you feel like you're too early to respond to a bid or RFP that you think is relevant to what you can solve, that doesn't mean that those bids and RFPs are things just to let pass you by. Those are listings that, generally speaking, will have contact information for potential pilot partner candidates for you. You will know that these are players that are putting money into the problem you're trying to solve, and even if they're taking action now and you're fairly early, it does mean that they may be open to talking with you about piloting something and setting something up. So let's say you have you've established a relationship with a potential couple of pilot partners. One of the really important things is to try and think about the world from their point of view, right? So whenever there is a an interest in a new technology, there is not only the risk from their point of view of trying a new technology, there generally speaking is a need to run a new technology in parallel with the way they've always done something, which means potentially more overhead for them that they have to take into account. You know, they can't put all their eggs in one basket of something that they don't, you know, they don't really know very well, that hasn't been proven, certainly with a brand that they are, you know, that doesn't yet have the cachet in the marketplace. And so the ability to not only help them mitigate some of those risks, but to provide them with a surrounding infrastructure of how they deal with problems when they come up. So it's not enough for you to go in and install something. It's providing them with a complete package of, here's the 24-hour number, here are the mechanisms we're putting in place to measure and monitor the, you know, the ongoing conditions, and, you know, even better, here's the big brand name that we're partnering with that is, you know, providing the extra support for anything that's of, you know, particular concern. Oh wait, there's more. Again, I mentioned that this is sort of a stage that often gets overlooked, but you know, to really leverage the actions and expenses that you put into this particular stage, you need to really equip yourself with the mechanisms needed to track that data collection. Now, again, this is another company I remember talking to about a month ago, and they were looking at industrial wastewater types of issues, and they had not standardized how they were measuring the results of their technology. And in fact, we're relying on the client to do some of that measurement, which is, you know, you're a startup, so, you know, everybody knows you don't have a lot of capital to spend. But then again, if you get different things measured in two different pilot sites, you cannot compare the results. So it's going to be on you to establish what the standards are that need to be measured and how frequently it needs to be measured, what potential contaminants need to be measured. If you're in smart water, then what is the data that you're tracking? It may be appropriate to measure different things in different places, but don't let it be a default of what happens. Have it be a conscious decision that you have reasons for doing that. So now you've got your data and you're developing a case study. You know, you may have a really happy customer. You know, one of the big things is you know, what do you do with all this stuff? This is a very, very fragmented market. It's very noisy. So how do you get visibility on your progress? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, working capital. So the capital-intensive stage, and you're always going to need capital. The one thing I will say about this is that, you know, there is money available. When you approach a potential pilot partner, one of the nicest things you can do to make your case is to come to them with potential funds, right? So there may be dollars available for you to do piloting of your technology with a little bit of kind of creative thinking, right? So, for example, if you're dealing with something that is a sewer, you know, dealing with sewer issues or leak detection, from a utilities point of view, this is an infrastructure spend, and there are dollars out there that are specifically available for infrastructure. At the same time, you have foundations that are interested in protecting XYZ watershed. Well, if you're dealing with leak detection in sewer pipes, you are in effect protecting that watershed. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of creative thinking, but the dollars are there, and if you are able to find some of those options, you're in a much better position of approaching that potential pilot partner. Stage 4, coming in for landing. Market desirability. So, you've got your case studies in place, you've got a business model, your technology works, you have a pretty good idea of how you're going to scale it. And so, you're ready to launch, and this is really where you end up finding out whether or not the market wants it. There's really no predicting until you're out there. And so the best way for you to prepare for that is to really put in the appropriate rigor. I use this word a lot. This is something that has been a big part of how I tend to approach any new initiative, especially any groundbreaking initiative, is you need to know the landscape you're stepping into. So, what are people used to buying now? And how are they solving the problem now? And how many of those players are out there? And what are the risks? Because only part of your market entry has to do with your elevator pitch. That's one piece of it. But if you keep in mind the customers you're trying to serve, then you need to understand the world that they are operating in, not the world that you're operating in. So if you have something that attaches to a pipe, so maybe a sensor that's going to go inside of a pipe to help with leak detection, or if feeding data somewhere, or whatever it is, from the buyer's point of view, do they have to dig up the street to put the thing in there? How are they going to maintain it? How will they know when it's not functioning? What else do they need to keep in operation in order for them to be sure that your thing works relative to what they're used to? What are the other mechanisms that they're going to need to address while they're down there? Should your device be built into the pipe? Or will it attach to all types of valves that your customer might need to deal with? So put the rigor in, because again, everything you do before you launch to market, as much money as it may cost to get to this point, it's still going to be cheaper than after you've launched to address some of these issues after the fact. Part of this journey, and again, you pretty much have to have launched your product into the market before you're going to really understand the best fit customer profiles. You do your best with some of the rigor in advance to understand what that's likely to be, but until you're out there, you're not going to really know. It could be that even though the product that you have goes into the pipe, that's not ultimately your buyer. It may well be that the buyer is, the consultant who ends up designing the pipe. This is actually really common in the U.S. The consultants oftentimes are the buyers or the buyer's proxy. But at the same time, the case for buying for smart technology, for example, may not be the engineering team within a utility. It may actually be the finance department, because that's where they're getting the data that they need in order to support the planning for the utility. So understand the best fit customer profiles. Don't be afraid to try different approaches, but be smart about it and be efficient about it, and cross things off your list as quickly as possible, because again, everything's more expensive once you've launched. And learn from what it is, from the feedback that you're getting. Metrics are really important. Again, this is something that you have to evolve over time, but the more you focus in on you know, around here at SplashLink, we call it the North Star. So what's our North Star metric? Our North Star metric is, you know, engaged, happy users. And there are various things that go into that when it comes to water interventions directly. If it's, you know, if it's a sensor you're bringing to market, then what is the most important thing to the buyer that that sensor needs to do? Is it an advance warning, or is it, you know, a real-time burst of information? If it's Legionella, is it, you know, something where again you're predicting an outbreak, or are you addressing the problem once it's occurred, and what does the customer need in terms of how quickly that has to happen? So identify what metrics are important, and identify the metrics based on your customer's needs, not your own. This sort of stands for itself. All of these types of things all factor into how you shape a sustainable business. And it includes pricing, right? Again, everything starts with your hypothesis as you bring something to market. You know, your courage is taking you to that step based on the rigor you put into understanding the landscape, but it will still be wrong. It just won't be as wrong by far as if you didn't do that work ahead of time. So critical needs in this space, this is probably the best understood of the 4 stages, just because this is oftentimes where you know, where you see a lot of support within or outside of the water industry for helping startups. It's, you know, how do you hire the right people? Do you offer benefits in advance? Do you know, package your product in a certain way? Within the water industry itself, however, it's really about how fragmented this market is, and that's why SplashLink exists, is because of that fragmentation. So, you know, we have increasing stress on water resources, increasing stress on infrastructure, and we can't be doing this by rumor anymore. But what that also means is that, again, you need to understand the landscape you're stepping into. So if you're stepping into a landscape with the best new products in the world, if you're perceived, from your customer's point of view, if your perceived only competition is, you know, a billion-dollar company, you know, you need to understand how you're going to be visible against that, you know, within that context. Is it going to be through partnering with them, or is it going to be through, you know, some non-traditional markets? So you start building out that reputation, integrity, and kind of come at it from a side door. So startups, in order to really navigate this, you know, product launch and starting to generate revenue, they need market intelligence. And this is kind of a challenging area for startups in particular, because generally speaking, the market intel reports that are out there, like Frost & Sullivan or Global Water Intelligence, are beyond a startup's budget. And you would need to decide for your own initiative what's going to be worth your dollars invested and what isn't. There are a lot of free resources out there as well, but you know, it's important to know what you're stepping into. But even beyond that 5,000-foot level is getting those contacts and getting connection to those potential customers. And again, this is where some of those relationships that you can form through H2O Tech in your region can become so invaluable, because even with a tool like SplashLink, where you can look up and find contact information, as everybody knows, there's nothing like a warm introduction, so that you know, somebody answers your call when you put the call in. And of course, capital. This is a capital-intensive endeavor if you are a startup in the water space. But again, you know, SplashLink provides some support by trying to keep some of the costs down for enabling you to access things like market intelligence or getting a profile that gives you a little bit more visibility to people who are looking for solutions, and of course all kinds of capital. So just putting it all together. So we have technical feasibility. This again is, you know, kind of taking something from the discovery stage into, you know, what is this? What does it do? Can it be repeatable? Is it scalable? Is it something that, you know, solves a problem from a technical standpoint? And marrying that with business viability. Okay, so now we know it works. We know what it is. Is there a way to make money on this? And is there a way to make money on this that, you know, that's not going to kill me in the process of going through all the other challenges of navigating this path ahead? Providing some core product market fit. Again, this is that stage that people tend not to talk about, but it is often the most wearing stage for a startup. I mean, it costs money. It takes a lot of time. You have to be on hand for whoever your piloting partner is. This is oftentimes where, you know, if you know entrepreneurs that are in the water industry space, this is often where, you know, you don't get a call back from them for a couple months because they're just buried with the logistics they need to deal with, and, you know, trying to figure out what kind of certifications they need to do and where they're going to get money to pay for it. And then there's the market desirability. So you've done all this work and you market, and this becomes its own beast. What team do you need around you? How are you going to enable some adaptable response to really make this product work so that you can generate revenue and grow? That is the innovation sweet spot. So on behalf of H2O Tech and SplashLink, we want to thank you all for your you know, time and spending this hour with me. And I'm going to turn it back over to Gary, and if there are questions, we'll get from there.
Awesome. Evie, thank you so much. That was a really extraordinary walk through what it takes to commercialize the technology and turn it into a product that can have an impact profitably as a company. Do we have any questions from those of you who are on the call? Did you see any of the issues related to the commercialization of your own technologies that could be affected by what you learned today? Well, if there are no questions, then I think we could wrap up the webinar. I hope you'll join us for the next one. I hope this was useful and valuable for you. Please consider joining H2O Tech. One of the things I wanted to highlight is that we have special discounted rates for small and emerging companies that include free, or as part, not free, but as part of the membership, you receive access as a member to SplashLink, which is an extraordinary resource and a great deal. And that's really only through the generosity and hospitality of SplashLink as an H2O Tech partner. So as CEO, Evie, I'd like to thank you for establish that.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with all of you.
Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.